You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
I'm Katrina, and I love anime.
I'm Steven, and I'm aware of anime.
But what if that affection could rub off?
Perhaps that excitement in her eyes got me curious.
I could offer up some solid anime.
I could give them a watch, just to see what all the fuss is about.
And maybe, just maybe,
I could learn to love anime too.
Welcome to Inspired by a Weeaboo. Hello and welcome back to Inspired by a Weeaboo. I am your host Katrina, and with me is my husband Steven.
Hello.
We just finished episode 10 of Fullmetal Alchemist. Steven, what did you think?
This was an odd episode, honestly. I mean, based on everything that you've said, with everything kind of coming back around, I'm assuming that the main character that we see in this episode, who's not Ed and Al, will come back around. But it was just the structure of the episode compared to the previous 9 that we've seen.
Yeah.
Because it seemed to go way too fast. It seemed like there should have been maybe 2 episodes with this. Based on the way certain scenes kind of played out, they were cut, and I'll kind of go into that as I go through my notes. We pick up where we're in present day, if you will.
Yes.
Those are air quotes if you didn't follow. Where we're back to the kids being 15 and 14, Ed and Al, and we find out Ed's a cheater at cards.
Of course he is.
Oh, son of a bitch. Can't even play cards fair. And they come to a town called Akira. I think that's how they said it.
I think that's how it's pronounced.
And based on the way they portray the town, I'm assuming it's a stand-in for a city in Italy. Because where they said that the town was submerging and coming under the water, and then they, of course, had the boats that they used to kind of
Isn't it Venice?
Venice, there you go. Well, so...
And it's sinking.
Yeah. So they make mention of that, the way it's kind of laid out. I wouldn't even say the structures really reminded me of Venice, but everything else about it, submerging, it's going underwater. It could be underwater after X amount of time. Venice, that was the town I was trying to think of, because I was like, I know there's a specific town, I can't think of it.
Venice.
But yeah, it's definitely Venice. So that's what I kind of took away from it. Now, when they get there, we find out that there is a thief in town by the name of Siren. Now, I assumed it was Siren as it sounds, but it's Siren. P-S-I-R-E-N, Siren. And she's an alchemist thief who apparently has a tattoo of what do they call it? An alchemy? Transmutation circle. I don't know why I want to call it an alchemy circle, but that sounds good too. But a transmutation circle on her chest.
Yes.
How the fuck does that work?
A tattoo.
But I thought you're supposed to like lay stuff on it, and then that's how you do your...
No.
I don't understand these rules.
You just have to be able to use the transmutation circle and transmute the things around you.
So she can pretty much aim it at things and just be like, pa-pow, pa-pow.
To a point, I guess you could say.
Because all she's wanting people to do are to unrobe her and get her titties showing.
That she never once shows her titties.
No, but that's where the circle is right on her chest
she can
area.
Hide it.
Fair. But see, we think, like, we don't know what she's up to, and then we get introduced to another character named Clara, or so we think. Is it Claire or Clara? Because I heard him say Clara, and then I heard him say Claire.
I always thought it was Clara.
Okay, I'm going to stick with Clara because I felt like I heard them say Clara, and then toward the end, maybe they were just shortening it to say Claire, because saying an A is just too difficult. We can't add an extra A to anything. But Al seems kind of smitten with Clara, and she reminds him of their mom because of the way she's acting. Something about apples. And, the apple gets destroyed, and he turns it back with a transmutation circle. And then they start talking to the detective in town, who seems fairly incompetent for the most part.
Tell me, okay, so I was waiting for you to say something about the detective. Because does he not remind you of another detective from another anime?
From Lupin.
Yes!
Yeah. Yeah.
He's 100% the freaking detective from Lupin the Third.
Yeah. Absolutely. I definitely even the way he's dressed, yes! He has, down to the wire. You cannot tell me. In fact, I'm going to, while we're sitting here chatting, I'm going to look up this particular episode of Fullmetal Alchemist and see if in the trivia section they say that detective is in fact the a homage to
the one
that
from
detective. Lupin. And I can't remember his name. I should, but I don't. And see, and now we're kind of breaking this fourth wall. Not a fourth wall. We're breaking this illusion. That's what we're doing. That I don't know shit about anime. I know a little bit about it. I'm not as versed like my wife here. There is no trivia for this episode. Bullshit. That detective is absolutely from
Koichi Zinaga. I don't have no idea. I'm
see.
so bad at names, y'all.
Okay. Koichi Zenigata. Zenigata.
That is the inspector.
From Lupin.
Yes, from Lupin.
Well, anyway, he's on the case, and then when he finds out that because he questions whether or not they are, in fact, state alchemists, and Ed is obviously like, of course I am, and then of course he makes, you're too short to be an alchemist, blah, blah, blah. And then of course that sets him off. He goes back on one of his little tirades where he shouts about things that no one said. So I'm assuming that's a trait of Al or Ed that continues, is he assumes or he makes shit up in his head that people are saying things about him being short, and he absolutely, they in no way said those things.
Yeah, that's kind of like his going trope. It's like, and it doesn't always happen. Because again, like when Clara says, calls him short or whatever, he says, I'm not short, I'd be tall too if I wore heels or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't always lash out, but usually when he does, it is something that's like not said at all. So it's almost like they say something about his height and his brain just kicks in with these outrageous things that they just did not say.
Yeah. So they, or should I say Siren, mentions that she's going to do her next grab, her next thievery, which I guess that's what some thieves do if they're arrogant enough. And they try to spring a trap on her. And of course she springs what I like to call a booby trap on Ed, because she whips out her, chestral areas, her cleavage, if you will, with her thing, yes, and kind of catches him off guard. And of course he grabs a handful of boob.
That was by accident.
Accident, my ass. He's a 15-year-old boy. He wanted to grab boob. And of course she gets away. We soon learn right after that she is the nurse Clara, and they confront her trying to understand her motives. Now, when I kind of was trying to understand what she was doing, and then of course when they explained her motives, I thought at that point, oh, she's Catwoman. She has she has a good reason for doing bad things.
Yeah.
And that seems to be like Catwoman's MO. Is she Robin Hood-esque, where she steals from the rich to feed the poor, but it's not quite that, if you follow my drift, where she's stealing from bad people and then giving that money to more needy people.
Yes.
And so she's kind of doing similar things, but not quite, because this is where it started to kind of get me a little like, what are they doing here? Because so she mentions that the hospital that they're working in is scheduled to be demolished.
Yes.
And when she explains that, they do this really odd cutaway after the detective kind of interrupts. Mm-hmm. And we cut to the hospital being destroyed. Pretty much. And they're just like, what happened?
There's no pretty much about it. It was destroyed.
And it was just like the moment that cutaway happened, she's caught. Or they caught her or something like. They set her up. They put the cage on her, and then there's this odd cutaway where she's getting away, and then that's when the hospital's destroyed. That what was odd about it, because
okay, so she tells them that the hospital's going to be destroyed, and that's why she's doing all of this. So they know what her next target's going to be, because she informs the press or whatever when her next target is. Mm-hmm. And when she goes there, they set up the trap, and then Ed and Al found out about it, and Edward is the one that performs the alchemy that breaks the trap apart to let her escape.
But the way the cutaway is, it's like you see the ground break out from underneath, and the next shot, it's just her running away, and it's like, whoa.
Well, because if you pay attention, when the ground breaks out from underneath, it kind of zooms in on her face, and she smirks, which means like, she's going to get out. And then, the next cut is her fleeing the scene, or at least far enough away from the scene where she then runs into Edward.
Mm-hmm. And then her and Ed kind of had a moment trying to understand, because he mentioned the Philosopher's Stone. If you know where it's at, could you help me? She's like, I don't, but if you ever find it, I'll help you get it. So you think they kind of have a moment, and then they again find the hospital destroyed, and they're just like, what? They freak out, and then she shows up as a nun.
Yes.
And they're just like, okay, well, maybe this is part of that. And then immediately after, we see that the monastery has been destroyed, and the same cutaway as they did before. And they're like, what's going on? And then she shows up yet again as a teacher with kids. And they're just like, she's up to something. She's a sneaky swindler. And they're starting to not trust her, which at this point, I wouldn't trust her as far as I could throw her. And it was just, very questionable motives she has. But then they start learning about the town and how it's emerging, and what, I guess, her being there and her motives, what it's doing for the town. Because other people have left, and all these people are kind of using this as kind of a... Like, how would you describe it? Like, what is her presence doing for the town?
Well, like they said before, they didn't have tourists. They didn't have anybody there. The town was dying. And then when she started stealing stuff, especially the fact that she announces that she's going to steal it. So then that brings people out, because they want to see her. They want to see that cat and mouse chase. And that's what's bringing people back to this town.
Gotcha. So she pulls yet another heist. Mm-hmm. This time she gets caught. And again, it was one of those odd cutaways where it just seems so snappy to her going to get it. And then the next shot, she's in handcuffs. And it's like... I don't know. Everything just seemed so speedy in this episode. Like it needed an extra episode to kind of flesh certain things out.
Would you like to know why?
I guess. I mean,
it's a filler episode.
Such a great idea to be stretched over 2 episodes. It's so little to be considered as filler that we just say to hell with it, and we just cram everything we can into 19 minutes, because that's how long these episodes are. Mm-hmm. If you really think about it.
Yeah.
And not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I have noticed, and I don't know if you have, but all right, so I'm going to explain to our audience. We've been watching old episodes of MASH, okay? But we also still try to keep up with current shows. One in particular that I'm going to use as a great example because I've noticed this in its runtime is Young Sheldon. Now, we're talking about two shows that are at least 50 years apart in age, okay?
Yes.
In the time that they've run on television. And you have to also think of commercials that go in between them. Now, we're not watching the commercials. We're watching, ad-free versions of these shows.
Yes.
A regular episode of MASH, ballpark, runs at about 25 minutes. Mm-hmm. Okay? A Young Sheldon episode, I have clocked at 19 minutes, 30 seconds. So there are 5 minutes less of a show today, which means 5 more minutes of commercials today than there were back in 1970s. That's insane.
Yeah, but you think of how much information and things exist today that didn't exist in 1970.
But why is 5 minutes less of a show, or why do they consider?
Did you say 70? Sorry.
Yeah, in the 1970s is when MASH came out.
Okay.
And then, of course, in the late 2000s, damn near 2018 at this point, 2017, I'm doing the math. Somewhere in there is when Young Sheldon started. So
yeah.
If you take a look at it, they're saying that, we need 5 more minutes worth of ad revenue for the shows today versus back then. I'm not saying that the show is bad. I mean, I love Young Sheldon, but it goes so quick when you think about it. Like we used to, when we started watching it, it was through, watching old episodes through binge watching. Yeah. And then we would burn through a season so fast, and that's why. And it's amazing that 5 minutes makes such a difference. But when you add it up over 20 episodes, how many episodes we have then lost in the process, or because 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes. I mean, if you do about 4 or 5 minutes, that's another episode. Yeah. And they've cut them down so deep. And you'd think 5 minutes doesn't make a difference, but it does.
I mean, there's animes that have very short
but that's
run times too.
Yeah, but that's the point I make with this and other animes that we watch is 5 minutes of it is credits.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's recaps and credits. It'll tell you that the episode runs about 20, 25 minutes ballpark, but then you have the recap, you have the credits, you have the end credits, you have all this extra stuff that's at least 3 to 4 minutes worth of runtime that you cut out. And you take a look at how they do credits nowadays. They don't take a look at Quantum Leap. That's a show we've been watching. Original Quantum Leap had opening credits. They had the opening credits, and you had the music, you had the cast, you get to see everybody. And it was only 2 cast members, 2 that they were doing this opening credit scene for, with music and the whole, collage of episodes and everything like that. And then this new Quantum Leap is just like, here's the title, and then episode. And then we just get the credits throughout the episodes as they're talking. So they even cut all this extra time. And you can't tell me MASH's opening credits are about a minute long at most. So it's still, for fairness sake, and even the end credits, that's 2 minutes. So it's still a 23-minute episode. In all fairness.
Yeah. So
that's all I'm saying. I don't know. I'm going off on a rant here. I got off on a tangent. Just talking about how everything is just cut down because everything's got to be faster. It's got to be smaller. Got to be quick. And I used to do that stuff all the time. Where am I at? Nowhere. Anyway, so Siren gets arrested, but only to whip out her chest and escape somehow. Still not understanding how her transmutation circle works, but I guess maybe we'll explain it at some point. And again, filler episode is what it definitely seemed like, because there's really nothing going on other than them just stopping by this town, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, other than the very last bit where she, tells Edward that to check another town for the Philosopher's Stone. Like, that's the only thing that really pays off with it. But I also, I don't know, I feel like it's still kind of a fun episode. Like, it's not over the top. It's not, like, I don't feel like it's not mediocre. It's not, like, mediocre, but it's not, like, pinnacle or anything like that. It's just, like, a little fun episode.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's a bad episode, but there were just some questionable choices on their editing and how they kind of progressed the story along that just felt like they were trying to speed it up, and it just seemed unnecessary. It just felt like you could have fleshed this out just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
But maybe in the long run, maybe the fleshing out part just made it kind of drag. And that's why they just had to, like, well, if we add this and we add that, it's just going to be like, okay, come on. Because it has no purpose. So I guess I can understand what they're doing here, but just some odd cuts, just some odd editing. And that's what kind of threw me off. And when you said filler, it makes sense. Which is why there's probably no trivia, even though there was clearly trivia. And we called it. And we need to put that on IMDb.
I did find a little thing. It's not so much as, like, concreting it, but on fandom.com, it has a little bit about the episode, and it does point out that the inspector bears a strong resemblance to both Inspector Gadget and Inspector Koichi from Lupin the Third.
Why would you say Inspector Gadget?
Because of the trench coat and the hat.
But Koichi had that too.
I know, but
so I would just say it was Koichi. I honestly don't see the creator of this saying, you know what? Inspector Gadget, that's who this reminds me of. He was probably thinking of Koichi. This is anime, for crying out loud.
I know, but still. I'm
just saying. I'm pointing out what I'm seeing, and it just, I don't know. Last thing I want to kind of bring up were the credits.
Yes.
And this is just kind of an odd observation on my part. So I would assume that with most credit sequences with anime, there is the music is to complement the series in some way. And they normally do put, like, the title and the artist on there. And I made note of the opening credits because they put the opening credit music song title in there. And it just kind of caught me up. Is there a character named Melissa in this show?
I don't remember.
Well, that was the name of the opening song, was Melissa. And I thought, well, that's very specific. So is this, did they just choose a song that they thought, hey, this sounds great and it would be a great opener for the show? Or was this song written for the show? Or
I don't know. I would say it's probably they just chose it because they thought it would be a great opener.
And it might be. I mean, I'm not saying that it has to be that because I've never really thought about it. There are a lot of great songs that I've heard in certain animes that I like, this rocks for this show, but the name alone, I just felt very specific, and I was curious if there happened to be a character named Melissa. And I didn't know. We've not met a Melissa, or at least I don't recall one. So maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe that just happens to be the name of the song, and they liked the song, and they thought, hey, this would be a great opener for the show. Because it works. I mean, for what it is. I'm not saying that all the lyrics make sense to their adventures, but whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they're specific to the story.
So, episode 10. Woo! We got filler.
Yeah.
First filler episode. So, I'm assuming this does not exist in Brotherhood.
No. Not that I can ever remember it being in Brotherhood. No.
Because I can't imagine how you would trim this down even further. I mean, damn. That does raise yet another question. I know that they knew that the anime was not completed.
Yes.
And already at episode 10, they had filler episodes. And that just seems like they were maybe padding for time.
Possibly.
But if they knew that the anime or the manga was not going to be done within that time period, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking at the time. And it just seems odd to adapt something that's not finished. But hey, we saw Game of Thrones pulled that off.
I was literally just about to say that.
I know. And to even a degree, I'm going to even say this. I feel that the adaptation, while we're looking forward to it, the adaptation of The Last of Us coming on HBO Max, or HBO, I guess it's just HBO, seems a little premature because to my understanding, the first season is the first game. So if you do season 2, that's the second game, I would assume. But then where do you go from there? Because then you have just painted yourself into a corner because now you have done both games, but you have nothing to go on. Yeah. Much like they did with Game of Thrones. You painted yourself into a corner because you're adapting something that's not complete. And of course, that is the fault of George R.R. Martin for not finishing his fucking book that he's been working on for how many years? But I feel like that's just such it's a tricky scenario because then you are left to try and interpret what the overall theme needs to be to end the show. And obviously they did. I mean, you would agree that they did a phenomenal job because you love this anime. Yes. And it seems to have worked out in your belief. But I would assume there's a different ending to Brotherhood because...
Yes, Brotherhood plays out... Brotherhood plays out differently.
Yeah, it would have to because...
than the original Fullmetal Alchemist. Not... I won't say it's like so... It's... different. Okay, it's different.
But I mean, it has to be because essentially these creators, the people who did this series, they had to interpret based on where the show or where the manga was at the time to complete their own show. And it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do to say where we're going to deviate and take the story from here? Because that's what the creator of the manga said. Make your own ending. So then one would assume he was not influenced by their choices because he already had it in his head where he wanted to go with it, and that's what he did. And then when they did Brotherhood, they just followed the blueprint and said, well, this is what he did. And you have these alternate realities, if you will, of both anime series.
Yeah. The main characters that I know for a fact there are ones that are different between the two animes. It only involves, from what I can remember, the 7 deadly sins. There is one specific, I think 2 if I'm remembering, but one of them that sticks out the most that is completely different. Does not exist in this one. And how he's supposed to exist in the actual manga and anime and everything. He's not in this one the way he should be. Okay. But like I said, Brotherhood, definitely you get a lot more of the backstory for Hohenheim and everything else, and his backstory is like the jumping off point for everything. So that's one of the things, as long as it took me to finally watch Brotherhood, I'm glad I did, and I can't wait for us to watch it because I am excited about experiencing it all over again, especially after getting to watch this one again, just so I can pick out those differences better. Because like I said, I've only seen Brotherhood once. So
yeah. Filler episode, I don't really know what more to say. It probably went off on more tangents than I should have talking about things. But I feel like they're related.
It's okay. It's a filler episode for a filler episode.
Right? But no, we made good points because I was making good points based on the stuff that they were talking about here. And I was trying to relate a lot of information based on the filler episode and all that jazz. So there you go.
You did good.
I thought I did too. So, hey, weebs, tell your little fellow friends and fellow anime fans to go find us on their favorite podcasting platform and to go to patreon.com if you want to get episodes early. I did a special episode, and I'm going to promote this right now. It's been out for a while now, but I'm going to promote it here. If you happen to like horror and you want something special, we put out a special episode of Horror Ramblings, which is another podcast that I do. It's on Patreon right now. You get full video with our opening episode for the season. We spoke to Lloyd freaking Kaufman. If you know who that is, then head on over there and you can see his beautiful little face. He's just a wonderful little man, and I love him so much. And the only place you can get is on Patreon, and all it costs you is $1 at very minimum. And if you want to throw in more, hey, that's fantastic too. So you can do that if you don't. And maybe we'll do something special on here with video, but I'm not going to guarantee anything right now because I don't have any ideas. But, you know, if it should happen, it'll happen, and then you can get them all there. Special Patreon stuff for you people who pay. And where are we at? Oh, yeah. We don't have social media, so, hey, tell everybody if they just want to keep up with any other things. pencilpaperproductions.com/inspiredweeaboo. We're also on YouTube. If you like to listen to your podcasts on YouTube, youtube.com/pencilpaperproductions.
All right, my little weeaboos. We'll see you next time.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.